class. I am creating this video in regards to the Graduate Case Study 1 that's due on Sunday. I might actually extend that date depending on how many people needed this video to complete it. So there's definitely some confusion about it. This case that you read from here all the way to here, that's just an example. That's literally a case that you can read from beginning to end of how they create a schema, how they got to the schema. We already created these. Diagrams. We've already figured out how to normalize data, stuff of that nature. Well, now we are actually, and also mapping business processes and stuff like that. We've done all that. But the relational database schema for that specific case study is this. Okay, so this is what ended up being created. This says open the DB file that you download. So up here, there's a start file that's right here. If I click on that, it's going to download it. And then if I click on this link, it's going to take me eventually out to here. Okay. This table here doesn't have to be there. It doesn't matter if it stays there, but you can just drop it and say okay. I just right clicked and said drop and said okay. Then you're going to go to File, Open DB, and you're going to go where you downloaded it to. So it's probably in your downloads. So select it, hit open, and it's going to populate it with these tables. And if you go into each table, you can see what it's made up of as far as the fields and stuff, right? So each table is an entity. City is an entity when you click on it. The actual state that it is within, that's the name of the city is one thing, but then the state that that city is in is a attribute for it. So the name of the city is an attribute, and the state that it's in is an attribute. So you have an entity and two attributes for this table. That's not really part of this project as much as just making a point, because I haven't really said anything about that yet. But at this point, if you go to export, you can say SQL schema, and you can see that it downloads down here. If you click the arrow or you go to your downloads folder, okay, so you go to your downloads folder and there it is. You can right click on it and you can say open with and say notepad. And this is the schema that got created. The difference between this schema and the other one is that this says create table, create table, create table, okay? Aside from that, these are pretty much the same, okay? So what I'm asking you to do is re-engineer a case for this schema, okay? So, you know, if we were an auto parts store or any type of parts store, where would we start? Okay, so you'd go back to, go back where I was here. You would go back here to our course as soon as I remember how to get there. Week 3. And you would read this whole thing and get an idea, but what are all these business rules and that take place? You know, when you create your entity relationship diagrams, you're recognizing that there's going to be relationships between tables. Well, those relationships have meaning, and those are the constraints. Say this says department name will be unique for each department. So no matter what, the department name has to be unique for all departments. You can't give more than one department the same name. So this is actually where I would start, is the table description, okay, and describe each table, and then from there, you know, and identify the constraints too. And you can identify the constraints because you already know the primary keys and stuff. A primary key, where it's like city is a primary, city is a primary key. What that means is this: it cannot repeat in that table. It's a primary key. It has to be unique. A primary key of a table is a unique identifying feature of that record or that entity. Give you an example. Your social security number is a unique identifier of you. It's never going to be used by anyone else ever. So that's a primary key. Now, with that said, don't ever use it as a primary key. Okay, if you use it as a primary key, it can create all kinds of legal issues and stuff like that. So you're recognizing what these rules are. If you see a foreign key, for instance, um, did they actually? I'm looking to see if there was one in here. You got the primary key. You got primary key. All I see are primary keys. Yeah, all I'm seeing is primary keys. With that said, let me explain to you the difference between a foreign key and a primary key. Because the schema doesn't have the relationships built into it in this case. Well, neither did this one. I should be specific too. The schema that gets generated by SQL always includes the type of data it is. So where it says varchar and it says integer and it says integer and so on, those are just the type of data it is. Considering something as a primary key is identifying as that is the unique field that cannot be repeated. These you could technically delete out of there if you wanted to. This was just a quick way of getting you a schema that you could use. Okay. Let's go back to the concept of foreign keys and stuff like that. Let's go back to here and I'll explain something. In city, you have a state and you have a name. But in sale, you can see that we have a debit, an item, a quantity. In store has a city. Okay. In this case, somewhere along the line, you're not going to type in the whole city for this. Well, yeah, you're not going to type in the whole city for the store. You're going to gather it from this list. So city in this table it's not a primary key. That's a primary key. The store number is the primary key. The city, in this case, is a foreign key. Okay, a foreign key is a way that we can create a connection between two tables. I can give you an example in Access real quick. Okay. And I'm going to just start with a blank database. And I don't care what I call it. And I'm going to create the simplest table I can. I'm going to do a sales table. And I'm going to go to create, well, I'm already on a table. I'm going to go home. I'm going to create, and this is going to be customer. Hit OK. And customer ID is our primary key. It's something that we're going to assign that we are never going to use for any other customer. I'm just going to leave it as an auto number. You could do it as text or whatever. I use auto number in this case just because it automatically generates a number for me, so I don't have to sit there and try to figure it out. Then you could do first name, last name, address, and all of the attributes that go with that entity of customer. Okay. So there's that. I'm going to save that table. I could go a lot more in depth on defining a customer, but I'm not going to for the sake of saving time on this example, okay? Sorry, I'm having allergy issues. So I'm going to create a new table. In this one, I'm going to go into my other view, and I'm going to call this employee. Nope. And the same thing's going to hold true. I'm going to give them an employee ID. Okay. Oh, No spaces. Don't put spaces in your field names ever. It creates problems. You can use an underscore. The first name, and I'm going to keep this simple as well, realizing that that it could be a lot more detailed. Okay. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to do a sales table real quick. And I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to give this a sale ID. Okay. But now I'm going to include a custom. Actually, let's put date. Cancel. Sale date. Sorry. Can't use date as a keyword. And I can do a date time. It doesn't really matter. And then I can do. I could do a store number or what have you, but I'm just going to do date, and I'm going to add customer number or customer ID. Okay. And over here it was an auto number, so I have to say that this is a number. And then here I'm going to say sales person or employee ID. I'm sorry. Okay. And I'm going to make that a number as well. Okay. So I got a sale ID, I got a sale date, I've got customer ID, I've got employee ID, and I can include all kinds of other things that are directly related to the sale. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to create a line table. Oops, sorry, not that. I meant to click this, then this. Okay. And this is going to have a line ID. And it's going to have a sales ID. And sales ID in this case is a number because it was an auto number in the other one. And then you could have item, quantity, and that's a number. And you could have price, for instance. Okay. And we're keeping things in the simplest format possible just for this point. Okay. This is the easiest way I can explain to you what a foreign key is compared to a primary key. I'm going to create relationships in this, and to do that, I'm going to add tables. Oops, I forgot. I got to put them out here like this. I can drag them out here like this. Okay. Now, a sale, a line, one sale can show up an infinite number in the lines table. I'm going to say enforce referential integrity, and what that means is that I cannot have a sales line for a sale that doesn't exist. Okay, so a sale has to exist in this table before I can have a line for that sale. That is a primary key to a foreign key. One sale can have an infinite number of lines. One employee can show up an infinite number of times. So one employee can have an infinite number of sales. One customer can have an infinite amount of sales or an infinite number of sales. Okay? So this is the way it would get laid out. Okay? And this is in its simplest format. You got primary key to foreign key, primary key to foreign key, primary key to foreign key. And what it literally is saying is a customer has to exist before a customer can make a sale. An employee has to exist before an employee can make a sale. A sale has to exist before I can sell items. That's the easiest way to understand that. Now, if you think about how I just described that, that's the way you're going to reverse engineer that schema. Okay? That's the way you'll end up reverse engineering that schema. One thing you might want to do is look at that ERD diagram, or honestly, if you actually felt like it, you can just take that schema, take the fields and lay them out in Access like I just did. I gave you a video on how to do it. So, that's always an option. I'm going to say save yes. And that's the easiest way to understand what a primary key versus a foreign key is. A foreign key is literally a field in one table that's connected to a primary key in another table. Okay? Sometimes they call it a unique identifier instead of a primary key, but that's besides the point. This program, this website doesn't actually show you a map like Access does. And when you do your schema, it's not going to map it out. It's not going to give you it's not going to give you your, what am I thinking? It's not going to give you your entity relationship diagrams or your relationships drawn out like I just did in Access. So if that's something that interests you, when you sit there and you look through this, you've got city has a name and a state, right? So city table, if I have a city here in, where was that store? That city might actually be coming from this table. That's not shown in a relationship or anything. We can make an assumption that it's coming from that table. So I have a list of cities and states, which makes sense, right? Have you been to a website where you have cities and states listed? You select a state and then cities pop up and so on. Well, that's kind of what that is. Okay. If I look at sale, you've got quantity, you've got item, you've got the type of sale. This would be for the accounting system, right? Because you got an item, you got quantity, and the fact that it's a debit or credit or what have you. Okay. And hopefully this makes sense, what I'm saying. That's why I wanted to do this video, so I could try to shed some light on it. I've had a couple questions, and I thought, well, it would not hurt for me to pull this up and show you that. Okay? So yeah, that's all we're doing with it. We are literally taking the database that you import, and then we're going to export the schema. And when you export the schema, you're going to open it in Notepad. And if you wanted to, you can literally take out these create tables, and you can literally take out the I might actually save you guys the trouble. I might do it and put it out there with this video. I probably will now that I'm doing this. But to have a schema, oh, I just took the word create out. I need the word table out too. Okay. And then literally you could take out these values here too. City name, there's a constraint that that the city has to actually have a name. That's what that means. So you type in the name, it's a variable character or just text of 15 characters max. The constraint is that it has to be there. You can't have an empty city and put a state value in. It's not going to take it. That's what that's saying. Okay. The city has to exist before you can place it in a state. So you have to have the city name. And the same thing here, number. Well, debit number, it's got a constraint that it has to exist in the sale. If that doesn't exist in the sale, it's not going to allow the sale to go through, because you can't create a record without a value in the primary key. Stuff of that nature. So as you're looking through these, just pay attention to that very first part, where whenever you see constraint and then you see this and then you see it's a primary key, well, now you know that that field cannot be empty. This field cannot be empty. This field cannot be empty. You follow me? I hope so. If you have any further questions, feel free to email me. That's not a problem. Because this video came later after I had some problems arise and stuff, I will actually post this, and I think I'll actually extend the due date out till Monday at midnight. Okay, if that works. So that's all I have for you, and hopefully this helped.